a little rowdy in my neighborhood this morning, so if you hear banging noises or music filtering through the wall, I do apologize. I am glad that everyone's having a good day out there in Van Nuys. I bit the skin on my thumb and it bled, so I put some electrical tape on there. This is going to be the air sign reading for the first week of March or so. We're going to clear the space using these tuning forks. Oh, thank you, Eve. And thank you for coming. I really appreciate your help moderating. And I'm getting the submitted dreams together for another dream video. Hi, Kayla's lovely. Thank you for coming. I have had my camera lose focus. Let's see if I can turn my servo off and back on. There we go. All right. So then the deck that I'm using today is the New Tarot. This is a 1990s reprint of the original 1974 deck that was produced in Quebec. So you can see there's some French language printing on here. These cards are very meant to kind of tap into the subconscious. So the cards are not super specific. All the cards are there, but sometimes I get into a reading and I just interpret the card the way that it seems right in the reading, based on the imagery, more so than sticking strictly to what the cards are, if that makes sense. It'll probably make more sense when we get into it. So we're going to start with the sign of Gemini. And Gemini, if you would like, just allow anything that you've been wondering about, any issues you're having you want to address in the reading, allow those things to float in the forefront of your mind. And if you are stressed out by any of these things or they're giving you anxiety, just breathe gently through it. You can inhale and imagine yourself filling from the crown of your head down through the soles of your feet with divine white light. And then as you exhale, you can just allow that energy, that nervous, anxious energy, to just flow right out of your body and be returned to source to be transmuted. All right, Gemini, what do we have here for you? Ooh. Gemini. Everybody's been getting the Nine of Cups this week. Let me mark down your timestamp. So, Gemini, let's talk about the past. We have the Emperor card showing up in the reverse. You can see the elements of 4 depicted in a few different places here on the card. We have the Pentacles, the Wands, the Cups. We don't really have swords depicted here. We have cups in a couple of places, actually. The Emperor could be showing up in the past for you, Gemini, to indicate that you had recently gotten everything kind of together in your life. You've gotten organized. You've taken control in your life. This card in the reverse kind of indicates also that this particular period has ended. So whether it was strictly taking control of your life or organizing everything, now everything's organized and you don't need to continue that process. But not necessarily that now you've given up control of your life again. Let's look here at the place of the significator. So, Gemini, this is going to be you in the current situation. We have the Queen of Cups, and she is crossed by the Empress card. So we even have the Empress, already has a couple children, might be pregnant again, has an Ankh depicted on her belly, the symbol of life. We've got a pumpkin here, lots of greenery. It's about fertile proliferation, the creative process. Oh, Eve, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Congratulations. The Queen of Cups here is a very maternal figure. So you don't necessarily need to be pregnant or a woman to be able to embrace this kind of energy. Although it could be pregnancy or motherhood, can also indicate these long-term projects that require a lot of nurturing and could even be in a traditionally feminine line of work, such as nursing or textiles or fashion, different things like that. Even dance, all of these things that sometimes, traditionally speaking, although in today's day and age, I think a lot of pursuits are considered feminine pursuits. Just depends on who's taking part in them and how they identify. So let's talk about now the MMCli. This is the root of the matter. I like to imagine that I have a 12 houses wheel laid out over my Celtic cross spread. So down at the bottom, we're looking at the MMCli, which is the cusp of the third and fourth houses. And this is the card that tells us about the foundations upon which the future is going to be built. And we have the Hermit card here in the reverse. The Hermit is Virgo's card, so a fellow mutable sign and a fellow sign under the planet of Mercury. So that is what Gemini and Virgo have in common, is both being associated with the planet Mercury. The Hermit typically goes into seclusion in order to take part in spiritual growth and development. And then we see that he is shining this beacon from afar to share that enlightenment with the rest of the world. So that might have been another part of this energy, getting everything together. And now we're coming down from the mountain to reintegrate with society. Here, from your perspective, we have the Wheel of Fortune. And the Wheel of Fortune doesn't really have a upright or a reverse here in this deck. We do have the 4 elements included in the deck. So pentacles, swords, cups, wands, and we have here the pentacles would be earth and the swords would be air. So that would be associated with Gemini's energy. The Wheel of Fortune, you could see that things at this time are turning in your favor and that you are headed into a new period of good fortune in your life. And that would be reflected in the card that we have here for outside perspectives as well. People see for you at this time this wish fulfillment. The 9 of Cups is all about wish fulfillment. Hey, I heard you like chalices so much. Guess what? They're on sale right up the street. You should come with me. We should go, right? So people perceive about you at this time that you are experiencing good fortune and wish fulfillment as well. Here in the future, we have the King of Wands. And this King of Wands, he's got his spear here. He's got this tree stump on fire. And you can see that he's got this double Mars symbol looking kind of a belt buckle. The King of Wands is a very potent energy. Can be a bit of a playboy, especially if we're seeing this card reversed, but we're not. We're seeing this card upright. Somebody who leads others by charisma charm and creativity. So that could be you moving into the future. That could be somebody you're associated with as well. But I think it's a very good balance for the feminine energy that we saw in the place of the significator. Because obviously that could be pregnancy for some people, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that. And we do have this King of Wands. You might be tapping back into this energy from the past where we had the Emperor. That's a lot of like Mars fiery energy. And he does have the horns like Aries, the ram. So you might have Aries placements in your chart as well. And that is going to be the places where a lot of your action might take place. So maybe you have a Venus in Aries. There could be love coming in. If you have your Jupiter in Aries, don't know how old you'd have to be for that, but that could be, paying attention to wealth and abundance in the future. But not necessarily. Those are just pretty loose assessments. It would be much more specific based on interpretation of your chart as well. So up here in the hopes and fears, this can also indicate things that you need to be cautious about. We have the Three of Pentacles. And this is a card about your professional reputation and about group projects, because of course that is how you build your professional reputation. So you could be hoping for an entry-level job. You could be hoping that your references will be good enough. This is very much linked to your perspectives on things. It might be that in this particular situation, it has more to do with luck than it does really have to do with your professional reputation at this time. One thing that I think is really funny about this card is that this guy is pointing to this box that's clearly been built in 4th dimensions. And it looks like these two are very skeptical of this guy's work. And he's got his arms crossed and he's saying, "What do you mean your daughter can't use this to hold her dowry for her wedding? I've built you this 4-dimensional box and you don't even appreciate the engineering that goes into that." So let's look at the midheaven. So the midheaven's going to be up here, and it kind of is going to be the result of this, of coming out of this kind of seclusion or hermetic state. And as is sometimes the case, when we start coming out into public again, we start running into temptation and other things that have the potential to derail us. So we have the Devil card showing up in the reverse. These people are obviously, under his power. We don't know how tightly those ankle chains are bound. This person here, engulfed in flames, trying to free himself, but perhaps to no avail because he's grabbing onto this guy's arm. This card in the deck provides a foil also to the Temperance card. On the Temperance card, the pentacle is upright and the figure looks much more angelic or saintly. Because this card is showing up in the reverse, it's letting us know that the potential exists for temptations to arise, for things to derail us. The devil card also can indicate illness sometimes, and that usually is quite beyond our control. So some of the things that the devil represents are within our control to some extent. Some of them are not. So I don't like to use it as kind of a victim blaming card, because I think that people have all kinds of circumstances, and that if you were in that situation, you might not necessarily understand why people do things a certain way. But they might feel like that's their only option. But in this particular case, Gemini, and especially because we have these are very passive and fertile energies. So it's not as much like where we have the King of Wands here. This is a very active energy. Hi, Captain Holtz. Thank you for coming. It's good to see you. This would be a much more active energy and would be more about taking control over one's surroundings. So depending on how you're able to tap into that is really going to determine this, whether you overcome those things or whether they overtake you. And then the final outcome card for you today, Gemini. We have the Knight of Pentacles. And the Knight of Pentacles is about money coming towards you. A lot of people say, well, the Knight of Pentacles moves very slowly. It's fire of earth energy. And so it's not necessarily that the Knight of Pentacles moves slowly. This knight moves more slowly than some of the other knights. It's definitely not as fast as the Knight of Wands, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that this knight moves slowly. I think this knight is probably coming in pretty quickly for you at this time. It's going to be because of the seeds that you've planted here in the current situation. And it's going to be because of these active energies as well. I'm really seeing in this reading for you, Gemini, a very good blending of active and passive energies, knowing when to hold back and knowing when to take action. And I think that is going to serve you very well during this time. So that is going to conclude the Gemini reading for this week. I will be going after I finish the other two signs and doing the extended crystal scrying with this beautiful labradorite palmstone over on the member side of the channel. You are cordially invited, but your presence is appreciated in whatever form it takes. So now we're just going to turn these cards over, and I'm going to move on to the sign of Libra. And I hope that you'll pardon me just a moment. I would like to move this down just a tad. There we go. Okay, I like that angle much better. I always hate seeing the top of my head in the shot. I don't know how you guys feel about it. All right, so Libra, if you would like, while I shuffle your cards, you can start to think about anything that you'd like to address in the reading today. Just allow it to float gently up to the forefront of your thoughts. You don't want to get into any kind of circular thinking about it or dwelling on negative aspects. If you feel those things kind of start to occur, I invite you to take some gentle, deep cleansing breaths. When you inhale, imagine the divine white light of Source filtering through your entire body, starting with the crown of your head and traveling down through the soles of your feet and into the ground below. And then as you exhale, you can just sigh out any of that tension or stress or anything that no longer is serving you. And let's see what we have here. Oh, wow, interesting. Interesting so far, Libra. Lots of minor arcana. Only one early series minor arcana. Most of them are like 8s, 9s, and 10s, and 6s. We have one major arcana in your reading this week. And it's in the place of your hopes and fears. So, when I look at a spread and we have a lot of minor arcana cards, that can be a lot of these minor mundane situations that are kind of sprinkled throughout everyday life. To me, it also seems like a period of your life where there's a few different things going on, like a few different plot lines going on at once. Usually major arcana plot lines are much more defined and clear cut. Additionally, we have a lot of 6s. We have a court card. We have 8s, 9s, and 10s. So 8s, 9s, and 10s are toward the end of that cycle through that particular part of the minor arcana, right? So that you are kind of maybe wrapping up a lot of different situations at the same time. And I will tell you, in the hopes and fears, the card that you have is the Hanged Man. And this is the only major arcana card in your reading. And I'm going to address this first and then back up and start in the past. Because the Hanged Man is a card about stasis. It's a card about feeling like you have to wait, or being stuck. Can also indicate self-sacrifice, because you feel like that is what is going to benefit everyone as a whole, even if it's to your own detriment. So the Hanged Man, it is elemental water. And the element of water is passive, but it's a very mobile kind of an element. There's a lot of movement still in water. They say still waters run deep, right? So that could also indicate a lot of complexity to a situation. So now we can come back here to the past and talk about where this all began. And in the past for you, Libra, we have the 6 of Pentacles reversed. On this particular version of the 6 of Pentacles, we have what looks like a nun here in the doorway of a convent taking in two children. And it looks like, whether they're orphaned or not, they come from very disadvantaged circumstances. They're wearing very tattered clothing. So the Six of Pentacles can be a period of time in your life where you were able to provide to others resources because you had an abundance of them yourself. This can also be about speculation. So it doesn't necessarily need to be charity. It can also be, oh, I have some extra money. I'm going to invest in the stock market or Bitcoin or whatever, people are doing at this time. This card being in the reverse, it's possible that you have kind of moved out of this energy. So not necessarily that you're destitute now, but that you were able to be very generous in the past and perhaps still again in the future. There's also a lot of ebb and flow of resources tied up in the Six of Pentacles card. Having more money coming in than flowing out, perhaps. We'll move into now, Libra, the place of the significator. And in that place of the significator, that's you. We have the Nine of Pentacles. So 6, you give out 3 and you get 6 back. You've doubled your investment. There is kind of a funky energy going on with this Nine of Pentacles, this dynamic between the gardener and the woman here who's probably the property owner, that they seem like they might be tied up in some kind of minor dispute. And she's saying, I'm the boss. You must go and do this thing over there. And he's like, well, I left those things being watered and I have to go turn the hose off, and you shouldn't have to explain to your boss your job every time you have to get something done. So even though you are in a very financially stable place at this time, this particular deck does not have the same implications of peace of mind that a lot of the other decks do when it comes to the Nine of Pentacles, right? Usually the woman's standing upright. She's got a little bird on her arm, and she looks very content and very peaceful. But with this hat that the woman's wearing, it still does look a bit like a clerical uniform. So I don't think necessarily that spiritually there's an idea of being like necessarily spiritually tied to your job. But this might be the kind of job that requires a lot of dedication, a lot of your energy. Some jobs you go, you clock in, and then you do your job, you clock out, you go home, you don't think about it anymore. But there are things, especially like healthcare field, working in emergency services, where that's always kind of in the back of your mind. So that might be a similar thing for you, Libra, at this time. And I only bring that up because of those continued themes throughout your reading. We'll get more into that in a minute. The crossing card for the significator is the Ten of Swords. I always think of the Ten of Swords as being like the scariest looking card in the deck. And a lot of people really don't like getting cards like this in their readings because it can indicate a painful ending to something. But it doesn't necessarily indicate a painful ending, especially if it's something that really, really needs to end. Sometimes by the time the axe drops on that situation, so to speak, you're relieved, honestly, just to have it over with. So now we're going to come down into what I call the MMCLI, which is down here. I imagine that there's a 12 houses wheel laid out over my Celtic cross. And down here, the cusp of the third and fourth houses is called the MMCLI, and it indicates foundations and origins of what we're going to end up looking at up here in the midheaven. So what we have down in the MMCLI, this would be part of the current situation. We have another multiple of 3. We have the 3 of Wands. And in fact, that 3 of Wands kind of describes what I was saying here. That with the 6 of Pentacles, you invest 3, you get back 6, you've doubled your investment, and you end up with 9 Pentacles. And that 3 of Wands is the idea that whatever you put out, whatever energies you're putting out into the world, are going to return to you threefold. This person here also looks a bit like they're wearing the outfit of a medieval doctor, or as they used to call them, cunning men and cunning women. And that these guards are kind of blocking them on both sides. And the cunning person has their hand up and they're saying, ah, yes, but these are not the droids that you're looking for. So we can tell that they will be able to talk their way out of this situation. And there are elements of that too, that charm, having the right words to say when you need them. Down here, from your perspective, so Libra, typically you are more associated with the finely honed discernment of the King of Swords. And additionally, the major arcana card of Justice, the scales. What we see here is the Knight of Swords. This is fire of air energy. It's very reckless sometimes. Very much about cutting things out, discernment based on binary systems. This goes over here, this goes over there. It's very good for organizing, very good for compartmentalization. But when it comes to these finer tuned types of discernment, where you really need to navigate a moral gray area, that is when the Knight of Swords really makes a mess of things. Hi, Malik. Thank you for coming. We haven't gotten quite to Aquarius yet. We're still on Libra. So sometimes when this card shows up in the reverse like this, I also mention cancel culture. That you might feel like at the current time there are things for which you might have been canceled, or that people might be judging you on criteria that have been overly simplified. Let's look over here at the outside perspective. Here we have the Six of Swords, and the Six of Swords in this deck is a little bit different than usual. So typically when we pull the Six of Swords, it's about an exodus. It is about heading for a new shore. It's about moving, relocation. There's a lot of mobility. Well, there is a lot of mobility in this card. We can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this dagger where this knave is relieving this knight or page. I guess he could be taking these swords to someone else. He's relieving this person of their money pouch. So this would be much more like the Seven of Swords in other decks. There is a lot of mobility still in this card. But other people might be seeing at this time some kind of, and it might be projected too, but that's why we read this card, to kind of give us like an idea of where other people might be coming from. Take the money and run. They might be thinking that about you right now. They might be thinking that I recently learned about a term called pay chaser, which is where people get a job just because they want to earn enough money to live. I think it's pretty amusing that people come up for a term for people who do not dream of labor. And I wonder if there isn't a hint of that here. That, is it really theft if I'm working for you? How much money does a person really deserve to get paid? And at what point does the money become meaningless in the face of the cost of living, right? So these are all issues that we are kind of hashing out as a society right now. And this card kind of speaks to those sentiments, especially seeing it contrasted with, this Knight of Swords. That, oh, thank you, Malik. Yeah, I want to try to cover as many bases as possible. This does definitely feel like some kind of financial situation, though. It doesn't necessarily need to be like a workplace. Like if you're a landlord, for example, people are very against landlords right now, and people might be feeling like this. That doesn't necessarily make it justified or true because, as I was mentioning, there's a lot of gray area to this situation that needs to be navigated properly. Let's look now at the future. So in the future, we do have the Eight of Wands. And we can see that these two people are kind of making a truce. They are bringing resolution and an ending to any conflict that has arisen. And the Eight of Wands is about getting your nice, neat, little tied up package all ready to go. Send it off. We're not dealing with that anymore. And this card is in the upright. So I do like to say in my readings that nothing I say to you here is going to supersede the importance of your own free will. But when we have cards show up in the future and they are in the upright, that does tell me it's a little bit more predestined or already set up to happen than when the cards show up reversed. Now, I'm not really going to go over this card again because I went over it at the very beginning of the reading. But we do have the Hanged Man in the hopes and fears and cautions. So, as a caution, I would say, do not put yourself on hold or sacrifice too many of your own resources for other people at this time. Because I know from looking at this past situation, there's a potential there that you're a very generous person and that you want to be able to take care of others. Let's look now up at the midheaven. So the midheaven, we're going to be looking at the destiny of a situation. We have another card about mobility here, similar to the Six of Swords. But again, in this deck, it's not quite depicted in the same way that we usually see. So this is going to be the result of all of these things returning to you threefold and your new financial situation. We have this card where 7 of the cups look great, perfect, wonderful. And the 8th cup, the card is reversed, but on the card itself, the chalice, this one is reversed. And it's implied that maybe there is a manufacturing defect about this cup. Almost everything is perfect except for this one thing, right? And we have this big void over here, the unknown. This represents a doorway, a threshold through which this person could walk out and decide never to open shop again. They look very dissatisfied. Their arms are crossed. They even have somewhat of a sour look on their face. The mouth is just a little line. They're not smiling. The eyebrows are furrowed. Oh, thank you for stopping by, Malik. It was good to hear from you. Good to see you. So where we have this card showing up in the reverse, in the midheaven, there is the potential for this kind of dissatisfaction with this situation here. And especially if we're looking at it like this, right? You might be thinking, I'm fair, but I'm firm, you know? There's got to be common ground and understanding between both parties if you're going to be able to work together. You can't just think that someone's out to get you or that nothing you do will ever be good enough, or you will become very disillusioned with that job or with that particular situation, because like I mentioned, this does look like there is a certain amount of money tied up in it. So it could be an investment, it could be a business partnership, it could be working for another company. There are a few different options here, and some of them might apply to you. It could also be a situation where there's a lot of money tied up in a romantic partnership. So these are all possibilities. The final outcome card for you, Libra, however, is a very good one, and I think a very good note to end on as far as advice to be given. This card is the Ace of Wands. The Ace of Wands. And as you can see, we have the caduceus here, the wand of Mercury. So this is elemental fire, but we are also tying in with this the idea of Mercury's staff. A lot of mobility, a lot of potency. This is a card of masculine potency. Like in Genesis, when God says, "Let there be light." This is that kind of energy. I say it and it happens. It is also a very good card for your own personal energy levels going into situations, that you might have a renewed sense of purpose and direction. All right, Libra, so that is going to conclude your reading for this week. I will be going over to the member side of the channel once this this live stream is concluded, and I will be doing the crystal scrying for the members. If you want to join us there, you're cordially invited. But your presence is appreciated in whatever form it takes. So let's move on now to the sign of Aquarius. We will get to the Aquarius energies now. I feel like a lot of these seasons have been passing me by quite quickly these days, so I kind of didn't ever say happy birthday to my Aquarians. And I haven't been saying happy birthday to my Pisceans either. This is the day of the Virgo. No. This is the day of the Pisces new moon. We'll be having the Virgo full moon a bit later in the month. So, Aquarius, if you would, kind of allow any ideas about what you'd like to learn from the reading, let those things kind of float around in the forefront of your thoughts. And if they are stressful things, just allow yourself to gently breathe through them. As you inhale, imagine the divine white light of Source filling you from the crown of your head down through the soles of your feet. And then as you exhale, just release any of those things that are no longer serving you right back to Source, and they will be transmuted. Okay, so here we go. Lots of sixes in the readings today. 2 6s in your reading. Oh, one of the blank cards. Interesting. All right, so let me write down your timestamp. Aquarius. And we will start in the past for you. So here in the past, Aquarius, we do have a card upright of victory, the 6 of Wands. And as you can see, everything is totally decked out in these flowers and vines. It looks very peaceful, very beautiful. There is typically a rider on a horse on this card, so that has implications also of mobility. But even so, this woman does appear to be, or appears to be a woman. This person is passing through this garlanded canopy, arms full of flowers, a very peaceful setting. So you could have been in that situation in the past, and because the card is upright, it looks like that is the environment that is kind of continuing into the current situation. So let's look now at the place of the significator. That's you, Aquarius. We have another 6. This time the 6 of Cups. Here's 2 guys at a bar reminiscing about the good old days. Maybe they knew each other in high school. This person seems to have done very well for themselves. Could be a lord or a merchant. This person perhaps a jester, perhaps just a knave. And of course, being served delicious beverages to help them forget the cares of their everyday lives and reminisce about the past. So the Six of Cups is very much about things that have already happened. It can be about things from childhood. It can be people returning from the past. It could even be about this particular situation, even though this is still going on. The Six of Cups, in the reverse, however, and especially in the current situation, is encouraging you not to dwell on these things. It's encouraging you to look forward to the future and not to the past. Stop reminiscing. Stop being nostalgic about these things, because the crossing card is telling you there are newer and greater victories ahead of you. So the temptation, of course, is going to be to rest on your laurels, Aquarius. But you are being urged, even though you have been very successful, to continue moving forward at a very fast pace. The Chariot card has a lot of implied motion. We have the eagle, the Pegasus. We've got this chariot thundering down a track. He's carrying a sword, so we've tied in that air energy. The Chariot card is typically associated with the sign of Cancer, but in this particular case, because of all the action, we could also see it as being associated with the sign of air, or with the element of air, rather. So let's look down here. I like to imagine I have a 12 houses wheel laid out over my Celtic cross. So down here at the bottom, this is the Imam Sila. It's the cusp of the third and fourth houses, and it talks about origins and foundations for what we'll see in the future. And the card we have there is the Page of Swords, I believe. This person has this sickle hanging off of their belt, and they are using it to thresh. It could be the Page of Wands. The pages are earth energy, and swords are air, wands are fire. So both very active elements. With the swords, there's an implication of fact-finding, of trying to obtain more information about a situation. With the wands, there's an implication of energy, that the Page of Wands might be somebody who's very young, but very enthusiastic. So a good environment for learning. This could be the Queen of Swords too, if we're looking at the implication that the wheat is grown as part of that passive feminine energy, the fertility. So that would be speaking one's own truth. So tying all those concepts together, making sure we've got all the facts, being enthusiastic about it, and then feeling the liberty to express one's own truth in a situation. From your perspective, we have the Seven of Cups reversed. So we see all of these options here, some of them good, some of them bad. And this card being in the reverse, you might feel, Aquarius, that at this time, these things are not available to you for whatever reason. But don't disregard this crossing card, which presents to us the prevailing energy of the significator, the current situation, where you are in the world right now. This is also a 7. And I think it's urging you to take action, because even though you might not see these options open to you, those options do exist on some level. So from an outsider's perspective, we have the Sun card reversed. And indeed, this is a card. We've got the Green Man here. We've got a couple of companions for the Green Man. And he is kind of also depicting the sun in this way, that his greenery, because it's in black and white, it's fanned out. It could be either or both. The way that the sun makes the plants to grow. So again, implications of fertility. But this card showing up reversed, it's never bad when the sun shows up in a reading. It's always good, always overwhelmingly positive. But when it's reversed, there is the idea that perhaps everything is perfect, except for this one little detail. Except there's like one little thing going on that you keep picking at, and it kind of starts to pull away at the situation, right? And people might be perceiving that about your energy at this time, that for you, almost everything is perfect. Almost everything is lined up like you want it to be. And there's just one or two little things that are amiss. So these are quite disparate from each other. That from your perspective, you perceive that none of these options are open to you. And from an outside perspective, people perceive that you have so many great things going on, but there's just like one or two things that could be better. Here in the future situation, we have the Two of Pentacles. So this is about balance. We have an alchemist here who is pouring liquid between two flasks. I suppose they could also be a milkmaid, but I prefer to see them as an alchemist. In order to effectively pour this liquid, they have to make sure that one of the vessels is higher up than the other to prevent arm strain and possible breakage and spillage and personal injury, because these are very large vessels. But they've found a way to balance that. They have found a way to make this job happen, even though perhaps they don't have the upper arm strength to hold both of those vessels in such a way that they could pour from one to the other. So the Two of Pentacles is about navigating those spaces where you are able to find that balance and make things work for you. And sometimes it requires engineering and making sure that you have the resources that you need in order to make that thing happen. Up in the hopes and fears, we have one of the blank cards. One of these cards is white and the other is black. And we could take this to mean no thoughts, head empty, right? No thoughts, head empty. Not a care in the world, really, when it comes right down to it. That even though we don't feel like these options are open to us, maybe that hasn't even been contemplated. Maybe you're not even thinking about that. This could also represent a migraine headache. It could also represent being paralyzed with indecision. So think about how those perspectives might affect your impressions of these situations overall. Because things can be going really, really well. But if your perspective is that they're going poorly or that things are about to turn against you, you're almost pulling the rug out from under your own feet. Up here in the midheaven, so this is going to be the result of all of this threshing, the threshing of ideas, that Queen of Swords, speaking one's own truth, the Page of Swords, obtaining that information, the Page of Wands, perhaps even being enthusiastic and perhaps a little naive. We have the Hierophant card. And as you can see, there's all these machinations. There's even some ideas here of, totalitarian ideology. We do see the laurels of peace. But the Hierophant is somebody who's very invested in the status quo. It is Taurian energy, so a fellow fixed sign, but air fixed sign is Aquarius, and then Taurus being an earth fixed sign, there is almost a complete lack of mobility by contrast from that air energy. It's not just being invested in the status quo, but the idea that the Hierophant acts as an intermediary between the higher power and the people at large. What is it that keeps a lot of people in their everyday lives from having the same kind of relationship with their higher power that they have through this person? Do you necessarily need someone as a go-between? It could be that you come to a place where you find yourself much more invested in trying to fit in with the status quo. You could also find yourself in a place where you're acting as a spiritual leader and guide for others. And this would be in a very, I want to say like a communal sense, more like how a pastor or other religious leader exists, rather than the high priestess, of course, is very potent in her communication with higher powers as well. But the difference between the high priestess and the Hierophant is that typically the Hierophant has this whole church structure around him. So that's something to consider. The final outcome for your reading today, Aquarius, is the Nine of Swords. The Nine of Swords, we have this woman carrying a basket full of swords. It's not a particularly good way to carry swords. They might be poking through the bottom of that basket. We also have this pig on a spit. Maybe you're feeling like a pig on a spit. The Nine of Swords can be about anxiety, can be about worry and trouble. I think the potential is there for those things in the future. But what is more likely the case is that your anxieties will be leaving you forever, or perhaps just for the better. So, Aquarius, thank you so much for joining me for your reading today. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be going now over to the extended video on the member side of the channel, and I'll be doing some crystal scrying with this beautiful labradorite palm stone. So if that interests you, you are invited. But as I mentioned before, your presence here is always greatly appreciated in whatever form it takes. I'd like to thank my moderator, Eve. I want to thank all of you who joined me for the live stream